The
You
giant
belong
Viking
to me
purchased
now.
the blonde woman everyone
There is
feared for
nowhere
$2.
left to run.
Her actions with the wolves amazed him. The small settlement lay huddled against the white expanse, wooden roofs half buried in snow, smoke rising in thin, twisting lines from chimneys. Here, people whispered about things they did not understand, feared what they could not control. And among those fears lived Alara, the blonde woman everyone avoided. She moved through the village like a shadow, silent yet impossible to ignore. Her hair shone like spun gold even in the pale winter sun, her pale blue eyes holding the calm certainty of someone who had faced storms the world could not imagine. Villagers said she could speak to wolves, that she had power over shadows, that her presence alone brought misfortune to those who crossed her. Mothers pulled their children inside when she passed. Men averted their gaze. Even the dogs stayed in their yards, watching her with tense alertness. On this day, however, something unusual happened. A figure approached the village on the horizon, massive and unyielding, a living mountain draped in furs and iron. Ragnar had come, the Viking whose name struck fear into the hearts of kings and warriors alike. He was a giant among men, broad-shouldered and taller than most, with hair dark as storm clouds and eyes that seemed to burn with a quiet fire. Stories said he could call storms and bend men to his will, yet he carried a shadow of grief that none could see. The village stirred as Ragnar rode into the square. His boots crushed the snow, leaving deep prints, and the villagers fell silent. At the center of the square was a crude platform, where Alara had been brought for reasons she did not need explained. She stood tall, shoulders squared, letting the bitter wind whip her hair around her face. Her calm defiance was a contrast to the fear in everyone else's eyes. Ragnar dismounted without ceremony. His gaze swept over the crowd and settled on her. "This one," he said, his voice deep and commanding, "is she the one they call the Wolf Whisperer?" An elder, wringing his hands, nodded quickly. "Aye, but she is cursed, stranger. She speaks with wolves, moves shadows, she brings misfortune. Best she stays hidden or you'll regret it." Ragnar's eyes narrowed. He was used to warnings, to stories of fear. Yet there was something in her, a stillness, a strength, a spark of defiance that made him pause. He had not expected this calm. Most would cower, but not her. "How much?" he asked. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. One muttered, "2 coins." Ragnar raised an eyebrow, amused at their fear. 2 coins for a woman of rumored power. It was almost insulting. But he did not argue. He tossed 2 silver pieces to the elder. "Then she is mine," he said. Alara's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. No one had ever bought her before, not out of kindness, not out of greed, always out of fear. And now she was being claimed by someone who neither trembled nor whispered behind his back. Without a word, Ragnar stepped forward and gestured for her to follow. She did, her boots crunching the snow in rhythm with his, until they left the village behind, moving toward the towering forest that bordered the frozen plains. Wolves howled in the distance, their cries echoing through the trees like warnings. Alara did not flinch. She raised her hands slightly, whispering words that only the wind and wolves could hear. From the shadows, a pack emerged, sleek and silent, moving toward them as if drawn by an invisible bond. Ragnar's eyes widened. Even he, a man who had faced countless dangers, felt the prickling of awe and caution. The wolves stopped at a respectful distance, their eyes fixed on her. "Do they obey you?" Ragnar asked, his voice low, almost curious. Alara's gaze met his. "Not obey," she said softly. "They recognize me, they trust me." Trust. It was a word that carried weight. Ragnar understood it only in battles, in loyalty earned through strength. But here, in the snow and shadow of the forest, he realized that power could take many forms. Night fell quickly in the north, turning the sky into a deep, cold violet. The stars blinked faintly through the swirls of snow. Ragnar set up a camp, building a fire that crackled and spat sparks into the dark. Alara stood a few steps away, hands folded, eyes on the dancing flames. The wolves settled around her, forming a silent, protective ring. Ragnar watched her, feeling an unfamiliar stir of fascination. He had conquered lands, fought enemies, and earned fear in every corner of the north. Yet here, in this quiet, snowy clearing, a woman moved with power he could not touch, a power that commanded respect without violence. He approached her, careful not to startle her. "Why do they follow you?" he asked again. Alara tilted her head, considering him. "Because I do not command them," she said. "I listen." Ragnar frowned, listening. He had never known that kind of strength. All his life had been about dominance, about bending the world to his will. But this was different, quiet, patient, unyielding, and it made him uneasy and strangely intrigued. Hours passed and the cold gnawed at their bones. Ragnar found himself glancing at her more often than he would admit. She did not speak unless spoken to, yet her presence was enough to fill the space between them. Every so often she would extend a hand toward the wolves, and they would respond with a nuzzle or a gentle growl, as if to assure her they were never far. Finally, as the fire burned low, Ragnar could not resist. "You are strange," he said, almost reluctantly. Alara looked at him, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Perhaps," she said, "but not the kind that should be feared by men of honor, only by those who fear their own hearts." Ragnar stiffened. Her words, simple as they were, struck deeper than any blade ever could. For the first time in years, he felt a shiver that was not from the cold. The night grew darker, and the wind louder, carrying with it the faint howl of wolves from the distance. Then something extraordinary happened. A lone wolf appeared on the ridge above them, eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. Alara stood and stepped forward, her voice rising in a soft, melodic whisper. The wolf stopped. Its growl faded. It tilted its head as if listening, and then, slowly, it descended from the ridge, joining the pack at her feet. Ragnar's mouth fell open slightly. "She is truly one of them," he whispered to himself, awe creeping into his tone. Alara turned to him, her eyes steady. "Do not fear what you do not understand, giant," she said. "Even you might learn to see differently." Ragnar felt a strange pull in his chest. He was a man of steel and storm, unshaken by death and danger. Yet here, in the quiet glow of the fire, surrounded by snow and wolves, he felt the first stirrings of something new: curiosity, admiration, and perhaps even longing. The night stretched on, filled with the whispers of wind and the soft breathing of the wolves. Ragnar, for the first time in many years, felt a moment of peace, though it was tinged with uncertainty. He had acquired a companion, yes, but this woman, this enigma, had her own power, her own will, her own secrets. And he knew deep down that their journey together would be far from simple. Suddenly, a howl pierced the night, sharp and urgent. The pack tensed, ears flat against their heads, bodies coiled with instinct. Alara moved without hesitation, stepping into the snow, raising her hands as she whispered words Ragnar could not understand. The wolves responded instantly, forming a circle around her, their eyes bright and fierce. Ragnar watched, captivated. He had seen battles, storms, and monsters, yet nothing had ever moved him like this: a quiet power, a command that was not taken by force but given freely, earned through trust. The howl faded into the distance. The wind stilled as if holding its breath. Ragnar approached her slowly with a mix of respect and wonder. "I do not know what to make of this," he admitted. Alara looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Perhaps you are not meant to understand it, not yet, but you will see. Soon all will be revealed." Ragnar's heart, long hardened, felt a stir of anticipation. He did not yet know what lay ahead, only that this woman, the one everyone feared, had captured his attention, and perhaps even his respect. The fire crackled, the wolves lay in silent vigil, and snow continued to fall, covering the world in white. And somewhere in the night, beyond the trees, shadows moved, waiting, watching, testing the boundaries of their fledgling bond. Ragnar knew one thing for certain. This journey with her by his side would change him forever. And as the first light of dawn painted the horizon pale gold, he realized that the woman he had purchased for 2 coins had already claimed something far more valuable: his attention, and perhaps the stirrings of his heart. The forest grew darker with each step Ragnar and Alara took, the trees standing like silent sentinels under the heavy winter sky. Snow crunched beneath their boots, and the wind whispered secrets through the frozen branches. Wolves padded alongside them, their breath steaming in the cold, eyes gleaming faintly in the dim light. They were not chained nor forced. They moved as though guided by Alara's quiet command, a living shadow that followed her through the trees. Ragnar kept a hand near the hilt of his axe, but his gaze rarely left her. He was a giant, unafraid of men or beasts, yet this woman moved through the forest as if she were one with it. Each step she took, the wolves shifted closer, yet never crowded him. He could feel the tension in the pack, their instincts finely tuned to protect her, and he realized something strange. The power they obeyed was not hers alone, but theirs together, a balance of trust, patience, and respect. "You do not fear them," Ragnar said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice seemed loud in the stillness, but Alara did not flinch. "I do not need to fear what I know," she replied. Her words were calm, simple, yet carried weight. "They are not my enemies, only the world's." Ragnar frowned. He had fought many enemies, men and beasts alike. He had conquered lands through strength and fear, through rage and steel. Yet here, in this quiet forest, he felt powerless in comparison. Not weak exactly, but unsure how to touch the power that seemed to flow from her like sunlight through ice. A snapping of a branch startled them, and the wolves stiffened. Alara raised a hand, slow and deliberate, and the pack relaxed. Ragnar watched in awe as she spoke softly to them, words he could not understand. The tension in the air melted, and even the trees seemed to breathe with them. "You understand them better than I understand men," Ragnar muttered, his voice rough. Alara glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the pale light filtering through the branches. "Men often speak with noise and anger. Wolves speak with patience and silence. There is strength in both, but only one teaches you to see." Ragnar stared at her, unsure whether to be frustrated or impressed. He had always thought strength was shown with force, with command, with fear. But perhaps, he thought, he had been wrong. Hours passed. They moved deeper into the forest, following a narrow, winding path that seemed to vanish beneath the snow. They spoke little. Words were unnecessary when the pack communicated in subtle movements, quiet gestures, and shared understanding. Ragnar watched her, studied her, and for the first time in years felt curiosity untainted by suspicion. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed through the trees, slicing through the quiet like an arrow. Ragnar's hand went instinctively to his axe, and he spun toward the sound. The wolves stiffened, hackles raised, and Alara stepped forward calmly. "It's a wolf," she said softly. "A lone one, hurt or lost. We must help." Ragnar hesitated. He had no fear of a wolf, but the quiet authority in her voice made him pause. The pack followed her lead, moving as one, their eyes fixed on the shadows ahead. Ragnar moved beside her, noting how the wolves' trust in her guided their own behavior. Even he, a man who thrived on control, realized he was learning from her. They found the lone wolf trapped in a shallow pit, its leg caught awkwardly in twisted roots. It growled, teeth bared, eyes filled with pain and fear. Ragnar instinctively stepped forward, ready to lift it free with his strength, but Alara held up a hand. "Not yet," she whispered. "Let it see you first. Let it know you are not a threat." He froze, unsure. The wolf's growl grew louder, warning him away. Alara knelt in the snow, her voice soft, a melodic murmur that reached through the cold and touched the wolf's fear. Slowly, cautiously, the wolf's growl faded and it lowered its head. Ragnar watched, amazed. She did not strike, she did not force, she did not demand. She only reached out with presence, patience, and quiet understanding. Finally, the wolf allowed her to guide its paw free from the roots. It stumbled but did not run, staying close to her side. Ragnar stepped forward and gently rubbed the wolf's back. Its fur was coarse, but its body relaxed against his hands. He looked at her, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You are extraordinary," he said, voice low. "I have never seen anything like this." Alara smiled faintly. Extraordinary is only the word men use when they cannot understand. They continued on, the lone wolf now joining the pack. The forest darkened further, the sun a pale disk behind layers of clouds. Night would come quickly, and the cold would deepen. Ragnar built a small fire, his hands moving with practiced skill, while Alara spoke softly to the wolves, settling them around the clearing. They sat in silence for a long while. Ragnar stared into the fire, thinking about the path ahead. He had expected the woman to be wild, untamed, dangerous, perhaps to fear her, perhaps to break her. Instead, she commanded respect without anger, demanded trust without threats, and inspired something in him that he could not name. Finally, he spoke. "You have lived among them for a long time." "Yes," she replied simply. "They taught me patience, they taught me to listen, they taught me to trust without fear, and I have taught them the same." Ragnar considered this. He had always ruled with strength, never patience. He had fought men who betrayed him, storms that sought to drown him, beasts that threatened his life. And yet here, in the quiet of the forest, he realized that patience could hold its own power. As the fire crackled, the distant howl of wolves echoed through the trees. Ragnar felt a strange emotion rise within him, admiration, perhaps, or the stirrings of something deeper. He had conquered cities and men, yet this woman commanded his attention in a way no sword or battle ever had. Alara's gaze met his, calm and steady. "Do not mistake patience for weakness, giant," she said. "Even the smallest movement in the wrong direction can change everything." Ragnar nodded slowly. He understood her meaning. He had always believed strength was measured in victories, in fear, in force. Yet here he felt the truth in her words. Strength could be quiet, strength could be unseen, strength could be in trust, not dominance. The wolves shifted closer, sensing the bond forming between them. They circled the clearing, eyes bright, attentive. Alara extended her hand and the wolves leaned against it, a silent gesture of unity. Ragnar watched, mesmerized. He had never seen loyalty so freely given, never seen trust so deeply felt. "Why do you stay with them?" he asked. "Why not leave, find others like you?" She looked at him, eyes thoughtful. "Because they are my family, because they accept me as I am, and because in their company I am stronger than I could ever be alone." Ragnar felt a pang in his chest. He understood solitude, pain, and isolation better than most. And yet he could not imagine giving such trust to anyone, not even a companion who had proven themselves in battle. And here she was, giving trust freely, not to him yet, but to the pack, and in that, teaching him something he had long forgotten, faith in another's heart. Night fell fully, the stars emerging as pale diamonds in the dark sky. Ragnar and Alara sat by the fire, wolves lying in a protective ring around them. The cold was sharp, but the warmth from the fire and from their shared presence created a fragile peace. Then a sudden movement in the trees snapped Ragnar to attention. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and a low, menacing growl rose from the distance. The pack stiffened, ears flat, bodies coiled with instinctive caution. Alara rose calmly, stepping toward the danger without fear. Her voice rose in a melodic chant, and the wolves responded immediately, forming a barrier around her. Ragnar followed, ready to fight, yet he felt an unfamiliar hesitation. He did not know what they faced, yet he trusted her instincts. A dark figure emerged, moving quickly through the trees. The wolves circled, growling low, yet they did not attack. Alara raised a hand, her voice firm but calm. The figure paused, shadows twisting unnaturally around it, and Ragnar realized that this was no ordinary threat. Something ancient and dark had noticed them. "You must be careful," Alara said, her eyes meeting his. This forest is not just mine or yours. It belongs to those who have always walked in shadow, and some do not forgive intrusion. Ragnar nodded, gripping his axe, feeling the weight of both fear and excitement. He had faced many enemies in his life, but none like this. And he realized that, for the first time, he did not want to face it alone. The wolves howled, a long, mournful sound that echoed through the forest. Alara's hands moved in quiet gestures, and the shadows seemed to pause, listening, as if acknowledging her presence. Ragnar felt a shiver, not of cold but of awe. In that moment he understood something important. The bond between them and with the wolves was stronger than any fear, and whatever darkness lay ahead, they would face it together. For the first time, Ragnar felt that perhaps strength was not just in power but in trust, not just in fear but in connection. And in the snow-covered forest, with wolves at their side, he began to understand the beginning of a bond that would change everything. The forest grew colder as they moved deeper, the trees towering like silent guardians beneath a pale, fading sky. Snow clung to their hair and clothes, and the wind whispered secrets through frozen branches. Ragnar's footsteps were heavy, breaking the quiet, but the wolves moved silently beside them, alert and ready. Alara walked ahead, her gaze focused, eyes scanning the shadows as if reading a language only she could understand. Ragnar followed, careful not to disturb her rhythm. He had seen her speak to the wolves, guide them, and even calm wild storms with her presence. But now he felt there was something more, something hidden, powerful and dangerous, buried in her very being. They say this forest holds spirits, Ragnar said quietly, breaking the silence. Old ones, ones that do not forgive intrusion. Alara glanced at him, her expression unreadable. They are not kind, but they are not cruel either. They only test those who come into their lands unprepared. We are not intruders, Ragnar. We are travelers seeking passage, and I have learned their language. He nodded slowly, though his fingers tightened around the handle of his axe. The calm in her voice did little to ease the unease crawling up his spine. He had faced armies, storms, and beasts, yet he felt something in the forest watching them, something ancient and aware. Hours passed in silence. They followed a narrow path winding between snow-laden pines and frozen streams. The wolves moved in perfect formation, circling them, attentive to every sound. Suddenly, a low growl rose from the pack. Ragnar spun, axe raised, and saw shadows moving unnaturally among the trees. Alara stopped, her hands rising slowly, palms outward. The shadows hesitated, bending slightly as if responding to her presence. "Something is near," she said softly. "A force older than this forest. It tests me, tests us." Ragnar swallowed, feeling an unfamiliar tension knotting his chest. "Then we must be ready," he said, his voice steady despite the rising fear. Alara nodded, her eyes scanning the darkness. "We will not fight it with anger, only with understanding." They moved cautiously, each step measured, until they reached a small clearing dominated by a stone altar half buried in snow. The wolves paused at the edge, forming a circle around them. Alara approached the altar with careful reverence, her breath rising in the cold air. "This is the place," she said, "where the curse began long ago, where my family's bloodline was touched by darkness." Ragnar studied the stone, etched with runes faded by time. "A curse," he repeated. He had heard whispers of it but never believed until now. "What does it do?" Alara's gaze met his. "It is not a simple curse," she said. "It is a shadow that follows me, a shadow that grows when I am afraid or lonely. If I cannot control it, it consumes me and anyone I care for." Ragnar's chest tightened. He had faced fear countless times, yet something in her words stirred a protectiveness he had never known. "I will not let it touch you," he said firmly. "I will fight it if I must." She shook her head gently. "You cannot fight this with steel, Ragnar. Only together can we face it. I will need your strength, yes, but more than that, your trust." Ragnar hesitated. Trust was a word he rarely gave freely, even to allies he had known for years. Yet looking at her standing alone before the altar, her presence commanding both fear and reverence, he knew he had no choice. He nodded. "Then we face it together." Alara smiled faintly. "Good, that is the first step." She began a slow, melodic chant, her hands tracing patterns in the air above the altar. The wolves responded instantly, circling the clearing, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The runes on the stone seemed to awaken, glowing with an ethereal blue light. Shadows writhed at the edges of the clearing, twisting like smoke in the wind, drawn by her voice. Ragnar watched, fascinated and wary. He had seen magic in battle, spells and curses thrown in rage or anger, but this was different. This was quiet power, deliberate and precise. Each word she spoke seemed to pull the darkness closer and yet hold it at bay. Suddenly, a shadow surged forward, a dark, twisting figure with glowing eyes. The wolves barked and growled, forming a barrier, but Alara stepped forward without hesitation. "Stay behind me," she instructed, her voice calm. "Do not strike unless I command it." Ragnar obeyed, though every instinct in him screamed to rush forward. He watched as Alara moved, her hands tracing patterns in the air, her voice steady and firm. The shadow paused, writhing in place, then slowly began to shrink, retreating toward the edges of the clearing. "Focus," she whispered. "It feeds on fear, not on anger, not on strength, only fear." Ragnar's eyes narrowed. He had fought fear all his life, and yet now he realized that fear was not always a weapon to wield. It was a force to understand, to face, to control. And in that moment, he understood a part of her power. Her strength was not in fighting, but in confronting what others could not face. Hours passed as the ritual continued. Ragnar remained close, guarding the perimeter, watching the wolves move in perfect harmony with her. The shadows occasionally surged, testing their bond, but Alara remained unshaken, guiding them with quiet authority. Finally, the shadows receded, curling back into the trees, leaving the clearing silent except for the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of the wolves. The runes on the altar glowed faintly, then dimmed, as if the ritual had only just begun. Alara turned to Ragnar, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and relief. "The curse is not gone," she said quietly. "It is tempered, controlled, but it will always be a part of me." Ragnar studied her, feeling a mixture of awe and protectiveness. "Then I will face it with you, always." She smiled, faint but genuine. "You already have in ways you do not yet realize." As the sun set behind the trees, painting the snow in shades of gold and crimson, Ragnar and Alara prepared to rest. The wolves curled around them, a living barrier against the darkness. For a moment the world felt still, suspended between fear and hope, shadow and light. But even in that fragile peace, Ragnar felt the stirrings of a new worry. The curse, though held at bay, was not destroyed. It lingered, patient and watchful, ready to test them again. And he realized that their journey together would demand more than strength. It would demand trust, understanding, and the courage to face the darkest parts of themselves. Night fell fully, the cold pressing against them like a living thing. Ragnar lit a small fire, the flames dancing across the snow, and watched Alara as she spoke softly to the wolves, guiding them into rest. He had seen many battles, faced countless enemies, yet nothing had ever commanded his attention like her. Not her beauty nor her strength, but the quiet authority she held over the wild, the shadows, and even him. The forest remained alive with unseen watchers, shadows that shifted and whispered, yet Ragnar felt a strange sense of calm. He had faced darkness before, but never with someone like her, someone who could hold the shadows at bay without raising a weapon, who could teach him that power was not always measured in fear or steel. He stepped closer to her, careful not to disturb the wolves. "Alara," he said softly, "do you ever fear that it will take you?" She looked at him, eyes reflecting the firelight and the pale stars above. "Every day," she admitted. But I have learned that fear is not weakness. It is a signal, a guide, and with trust it can be faced. Ragnar nodded slowly. Trust. A simple word, yet heavier than any axe he had lifted, deeper than any storm he had survived. And for the first time he felt that he understood it, if only a little. Suddenly, a distant howl shattered the quiet night. The wolves stiffened, ears pricked, bodies tense. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the trees, and Ragnar's heart tightened. He realized that the forest was not done with them. The curse, the dark forces, were still testing, waiting for the moment to strike. Alara rose gracefully, moving toward the sound without hesitation. Her voice rose in a chant, and the wolves responded immediately, forming a protective barrier around her. Ragnar followed, gripping his axe tightly, feeling a mixture of fear and anticipation. Together they faced the darkness, not with rage, not with force, but with unity. The bond between them, strengthened through trust and patience, held firm against the unseen threat. And in that moment, Ragnar realized something profound. He did not merely fight beside her. He learned from her. He was changed by her. The night stretched on, filled with the whispers of wind, the soft breathing of the wolves, and the distant shifting of shadows. The curse lingered, patient and watchful, yet Ragnar and Alara remained steadfast. And as the first light of dawn crept through the trees, painting the snow in gentle gold, Ragnar knew one thing for certain. Their journey together was far from over. The darkness would return, testing their bond, their courage, and their hearts. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, stronger, wiser, and forever changed. Dawn rose slowly over the snow-covered forest, painting the world in pale gold and silver. The air was crisp and still, yet heavy with anticipation, as if the forest itself held its breath. Ragnar and Alara stood at the edge of a frozen ravine. Wolves gathered around them, ears twitching at every whisper of wind. The shadows that had haunted them for days lingered at the edges of the forest, patient and watchful. Alara's hands rested on the hilt of a dagger carved from bone and steel, her breath rising in soft clouds. "This is it," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "The moment we face the heart of the curse." Ragnar adjusted his grip on his axe, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down like snow on pine branches. He had faced countless enemies in his life, warriors, beasts, storms, yet never had he felt such a mixture of fear and hope. And yet standing beside her he felt courage he had long thought lost. "The shadows," Ragnar muttered, glancing at the shifting darkness along the tree line. "They've been testing us, but now they want more." Alara nodded. "They feed on hesitation, on doubt, on fear. We cannot let them touch our hearts. Together we are stronger than they can ever be." Ragnar's eyes met hers. There was a fire in them, fierce and calm all at once. "Then we face it together," he said, voice firm, echoing his promise from days before. The wolves growled low, circling them in a protective barrier. Alara's hands moved in fluid, deliberate gestures, and the shadows recoiled slightly, as though sensing the strength of the bond between her, Ragnar, and the pack. Suddenly, a dark shape surged forward from the trees, faster than the eye could follow. It was a twisting shadow, eyes glowing like embers, moving with a hunger that chilled Ragnar to the bone. He swung his axe instinctively, cutting through air as the shadow darted around him. Yet Alara stepped forward, her voice rising in a melodic chant, her hands tracing symbols in the snow that glowed faintly under her touch. The wolves barked and leaped, forming a circle around her, but she did not flinch. Instead, she spoke to them as if they were not beasts but extensions of herself. The shadow faltered, writhing as if in pain, then recoiled toward the trees, circling them like a predator unsure of its prey. "You see," Alara said, her eyes never leaving the darkness. "It can be held at bay but not destroyed, only controlled." Ragnar nodded, understanding finally what she meant. This was not a battle to be won with brute force. It was a challenge of will, courage, and trust. And for the first time, he realized that he could fight not only beside her but through her guidance. The shadows surged again, stronger this time, and Ragnar felt a pang of fear, not for himself but for her. He had faced death countless times, yet he had never feared losing someone like this before. Alara glanced at him, her gaze steady. "Do not let fear rule you, Ragnar. Not now, not ever. Trust in me, trust in us." He inhaled deeply, letting the cold winter air fill his lungs, and nodded. For the first time, he put aside his instincts to dominate, to control, to fight alone. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and together they stepped forward. The shadows recoiled and the wolves shifted closer, forming a living wall around them. Alara's chant grew louder, more confident, each word shaping the air and snow around them. The runes carved into the trees glowed faintly, pulsing with the rhythm of her voice. Ragnar felt a warmth spread through him, a quiet power that came not from his axe or strength, but from trust, connection, and belief. The largest shadow surged forward, faster than before, and Ragnar swung his axe, but instead of striking he paused, watching Alara. She lifted her hands and the shadow froze, writhing, struggling against a force it could not see. The wolves howled, echoing her chant, joining their voices in a symphony of defiance. "You can do this," Ragnar said softly, more to himself than to her. And then he realized he could do it because they were together. Alone, he would never have faced the darkness, but with her, he felt invincible in a way that had nothing to do with strength or weapons. Slowly, the shadow began to shrink, condensing into a smaller, more contained form. Its eyes softened, its writhing slowed, until finally it collapsed into a small, harmless mist that dissolved into the snow. The forest fell silent, the only sound the steady breathing of Ragnar, Alara, and the wolves. Alara lowered her hands, exhausted but radiant. "It is done for now," she said. "The curse is tempered, controlled, but it will always be part of me. Always a shadow at the edge of my life." Ragnar approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her presence and the quiet power that had guided them both. "Then we will face it together," he said, voice low but firm. "No matter what comes, I will stand with you." Alara looked at him, and for the first time Ragnar saw vulnerability, raw and honest, in her eyes. "You mean that?" she asked softly. "I do," he said. "I have faced armies, storms, and death itself. But I have never faced anything like this, and I never want to face it alone." She smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and something deeper, something like hope. "Then we have begun a bond that even the darkness cannot break." For a moment they simply stood together, side by side, wolves circling them like silent guardians. The snow glowed in the early morning light, and the forest seemed to breathe around them. Ragnar realized that he had changed. The solitude he had carried for so long, the anger, the fear, the distrust, all of it had begun to fade, replaced by something quieter, stronger, and more enduring. The wolves shifted, nuzzling against Alara and then Ragnar, a gesture of approval, acceptance, and loyalty. They were not just beasts or companions, they were witnesses to a bond forged in snow, shadow, and shared courage. Suddenly, a distant howl echoed through the forest. Ragnar stiffened, ready for danger, but Alara placed a hand on his chest, calm and steady. "It is only a reminder," she said. "The shadows linger, they will always test us, but we are no longer afraid." Ragnar nodded. He realized that this was true strength, not the power of steel or fear, but the power of trust, unity, and understanding. He had learned to see beyond the immediate, beyond brute force, and into the heart of courage itself. The sun rose higher, scattering light across the snow, and for the first time in years, Ragnar felt peace. Not complete, not unbroken, but real and warm in a way he had thought impossible. And beside him, Alara radiated the same quiet strength, a woman who had been feared by many, yet now stood unafraid, tempered by her own power and the bond they shared. As they began walking again, deeper into the forest, Ragnar felt a new sense of purpose. The journey would continue, There would be more shadows, more challenges, more tests of courage and trust, but they would face it all together, stronger than ever. Ragnar, Alara said softly, glancing at him. The forest is vast, the shadows many, but together we can walk any path, face any darkness. He looked at her, eyes steady, voice firm. Together. The wolves ran ahead, scouting the path, their howls echoing through the trees like a promise. The forest no longer felt threatening. It was alive, and they were a part of it. Shadows lingered at the edges, but they no longer held power over their hearts. And as the day unfolded, snow sparkling under the pale sun, Ragnar realized something he had never known before. Love, trust, and courage could be stronger than fear, stronger than any curse, stronger than the darkest shadows. And in that moment, he knew that their journey together had only just begun. But whatever came next, they would face it not as warrior and survivor, but as partners, equals, and keepers of each other's hearts. For in the heart of the frozen forest, amid wolves, shadows, and ancient power, a giant Viking and the woman everyone feared had found something greater than any battle or conquest: redemption, trust, and a bond that would endure forever. Word count.